Vikes, Lions, 1 o'clock Sunday. Minnesota's -7, totals 47. The Vikings have covered in 3 out of their last 4 ball games. Top 10 in the NFL in road scoring. Kirk Cousins has thrown for over 3,000 yards already, along with 23 touchdowns. Now Cousins, he's also thrown just 3 interceptions for the entire season. His favorite target's been Justin Jefferson, who's got over 1,000 receiving yards and 6 touchdowns. And speaking of receiving touchdowns, Adam Thielen's got 10 touchdown grabs on the year himself. And although this Viking defense has struggled, they do still rank in the top 10 in the NFL in fewest first quarter points allowed. They're taking on a winless Lions team who's dead last in the NFL in rushing yards at home. Detroit's also dead last in scoring on average per game on their home field as well. The Lions have dropped 8 out of their last 10 head-to-head meetings with the Vikings. When it comes to the injury report, Flowers, Vaitai, Nelson, Swift, and Parker, they're all questionable for Detroit. Meanwhile, for Minnesota, Barr, Davis, and Bynum, they're listed as questionable for them. Dalvin Cook is out. When it comes to the total in this one, 3 out of Minnesota's last 4 got over the number. 5 and 1 of the over in their last 6 on the road. I'm going to lean toward Minnesota -7 over 47. Next contest, it is going to be Cardinals-Bears, 1 o'clock Eastern start time. Arizona's -8, totals 45. But despite all their numbers unanimously, let's try that again. But despite all of the numbers unanimously favoring Arizona in this one, it's actually going to be a cold, blustery day in Chicago on Sunday. As a matter of fact, they're actually expecting some sort of precipitation at some point in the afternoon, and that certainly favors the ground and pound style of the Bears. Chicago currently is in the top 10 in the league in pass defense. They're also in the top 10 in fewest home points allowed. Robert Quinn has 11 sacks on the season, 36 tackles, and a couple of forced fumbles. And speaking of tackles, Roquan Smith has 113 total tackles on the season, along with 3 sacks. The Bears lead the NFL in fewest first quarter points allowed at home. They're also the league leaders in fewest second quarter points allowed as well. They're taking on a Cardinals team who, like I said, they do really have favorable stats in this head-to-head matchup. Having said that, though, once again, weather could play a factor in slowing these guys down, both offensively and on special teams. Now, the Cardinals are also in the bottom 5 in the NFL in fourth quarter scoring, believe it or not. And when it comes to the injury report, Hopkins, Pugh, Vallejo, Ward, and Murray, they're all listed as questionable. Meanwhile, Hicks, Williams, Smith, and Fields, they're listed as questionable for Chicago. When it comes to the number in this one, 4 out of Chicago's last 5 home games fell under the number. The Bears are officially 8-3 to the under for the entire season themselves. Now, Arizona saw 3 out of their last 5 fall under the posted number as well. I'm going to lean towards Chicago +8 under 45. Next matchup, Buccaneers, Falcons, 1 o'clock East. Tampa Bay is -11, totals 50.5. But as good as the Bucs have been here this season, they've really done a bad job covering the number on the road. They're just 1-5 against the spread when traveling, and they're in the bottom 10 in points allowed per contest away from home. This Bucs D is also in the bottom 3 in second quarter points allowed as well. They're taking on a Falcons team who won 4 out of their last 7, and they successfully covered the number 4 times during that stretch. Atlanta's done a really nice job defending the pass at home. They're in the top 5 in pass defense on their home field. Foy Oluokun has 119 tackles on this season, a couple of sacks and 3 TFLs. Eric Harris has 61 tackles and 8 PBUs himself. This Atlanta defense is in the top 10 in fewest first quarter points allowed. Now, injury-wise, Jones, Bullard, and Sheffield, they're questionable for Atlanta. Meanwhile, for Tampa Bay, Brown, Marpet, Stinney, Dean, and Darden are questionable for them. When it comes to the total in this one, Tampa's gone 60% to the over in their last 10 ball games, 9-1 to the over in their last 10 meetings with Atlanta. I'm going to lean toward the Falcons plus 11 over 50.5. Next contest, Giants-Dolphins, 1 o'clock Eastern kickoff. Miami's -4, totals 41. The Red Hot Dolphins won their last 4 straight, 5-0 against the spread in their last 5. This Miami defense is in the top 3 in fewest yards allowed per play at home. Xavier Howard has 3 interceptions and 13 PBUs. The cornerback also has a couple of forced fumbles and a scoop and score. Meanwhile, Phillips and Ogba have 12.5 combined sacks together as well. The Fins are currently in the top 10 in rush defense, top 5 in takeaways. They're taking on a Giants team who plays their worst football on the road, just 1-4 straight up when traveling, bottom 3 in road pass defense. The G-men are also allowing over $1.25 per contest on the ground. They're currently in the bottom 10 in the NFL in that particular category. New York's also scoring just 18 points a game offensively, and they're rushing for just 90 yards per contest. Injury-wise, Rudolph, Shepard, Jackson, Smith, Holmes, and Tony are questionable. Meanwhile, for the Fins, Shaheen and Williams are questionable for them. And when it comes to the total in this one, 5 out of Miami's last 7 fell under the number. Meanwhile, the Giants saw their last 6 straight fall under the total themselves. 8-3 to the under for the entire season. Give me Miami -4, under 41. Next ball game, Chargers-Bengals, 1 o'clock Eastern start time. Cincinnati's -3, totals 50.5. The Bengals won their last 2 straight, 6-3 straight up in their last 9. The Bengals are in the top 10 in scoring, top 10 in home rushing. Joe Mixon's rushed for over 900 yards already, 11 touchdowns on the ground for the running back. Meanwhile, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, they've also combined for over 1,400 receiving yards and 11 scores. But it's not just all offense in Cincinnati. The Bengals are in the top 10 in fewest points allowed per contest, and they also have a top 5 rush defense. They're taking on a Chargers team who lost 4 out of their last 6. They also posted a record of just 1-5 against the spread in those very contests I just mentioned. This Charger defense is allowing 27 points a game, and they give up more rush yards per game than any other team in the NFL. Meanwhile, offensively, the Chargers are dead last in the league in rush yards per game when traveling. When it comes to the injury report, Filer, Gilman, and Samuel are questionable. Meanwhile, for Cincinnati, Reif, Hopkins, and Tate, they are questionable for them. When it comes to the scoring in this one, 3 out of the Chargers' last 5 got over the posted total. Meanwhile, the Bengals went 4 money the over in their last 5 themselves. I'm going to lean towards Cincinnati -3, over 50.5. Next contest, Colts, Texans, 1 o'clock Eastern kickoff. Indianapolis is -9, totals 46. Despite their collapse against Tampa Bay this past week, the Colts have still gotten the W in 5 out of their last 7 ball games. 6-3 against the spread in their last 9. The Colts are scoring over 28 points a game. They're currently in the top 5 in the NFL in points scored on average per contest. Indy's also in the top 5 in rush yards per game. Jonathan Taylor's leading the league with 1,205 rushing yards, 14 touchdowns on the ground for the running back as well. The Colts are officially 4-1 against the spread when traveling. Meanwhile, defensively on the other side of the ball, the Colts are in the top 10 in fewest points allowed away from home. They're taking on a 2-9 Houston club who got the W just 1 time at home this year. Houston scores fewer points per contest than any other team in football. They're also dead last in rush yards per game. Now, this anemic Houston offense throws for just 186 yards per contest. Meanwhile, defensively, they're in the bottom 3 in rush defense as well. When it comes to the number in this one, Houston's last 3 straight fell under the number. 7-2 to the under in their last 9. Give me Indianapolis -9, under 46. Next game, Eagles-Jets, 1 o'clock Eastern start time. Philadelphia's -6.5, totals 45. Despite a really poor effort against the Giants this past Sunday, The Eagles are still playing their best football on the road. They're in the top 5 in road scoring, top 5 in road rushing. Meanwhile, defensively, the Eagles are amongst the league leaders in defensive yards per play when traveling. Darius Slay has 3 picks on the season, 2 scoop and scores, and a pick 6 for big play Slay. Meanwhile, Javon Hargrave has 7 sacks and 8 TFLs for the season. The Birds are in the top 10 in fewest fourth quarter points allowed. They're taking on a Jets team who lost 5 out of their last 7, and they cover the number in just 27% of their contests for the entire year. This New York defense allows over 30 points a game. They find themselves in the bottom 3 in yards allowed per contest. Meanwhile, offensively, the Jets are scoring only 18 points a game, and they rush for a piddly 86 yards per contest. Now, injury-wise, Flacco, Rankins, Davis, and Williams, they're all questionable. Meanwhile, for the Eagles, Howard, Hurts, and Driscoll are questionable for them. Now, total-wise, Philadelphia saw 4 out of their last 6 get over the posted number. Meanwhile, 6 out of the Jets' last 8 got over the line themselves. I'm going to lean toward Philadelphia, minus 6.5, over 45. Next game, Washington, Las Vegas, 4:05 Eastern kickoff. The Raiders are minus 3, totals 49.5. Now, Vegas did lose 3 out of their last 4 ball games, 1-3 against the spread during that stretch. The Raiders are also just 2-4 against the number at Allegiant Stadium, and they've really struggled to play defense there. The Raiders allow more rush yards per contest at home than any other team in football. They're also in the bottom 5 in home points allowed. They're taking on a Washington team who won their last 3 straight, and they successfully covered the number in all 3 of those victories. Now, what does the Washington football team do well? Well, that's a great question. For one, they've actually rushed the football quite well. They're in the top 10 in the NFL in rush yards per contest. Meanwhile, defensively, the football team's actually got a top 5 rush defense. Jonathan Allen has 6 sacks thus far in the season, 8 TFLs for Allen. Meanwhile, Cole Holcomb has 92 total tackles and a couple of forced fumbles. Washington's currently in the top 10 in fewest fourth quarter points allowed on the road. And when it comes to the injury report, McKissick, Schweitzer, Larson, and Seals-Jones, they're all listed as questionable for Washington. Meanwhile, for Vegas, Waller, Nassib, Kwiatkowski, and Nixon, they're questionable for them. When it comes to the total in this one, 4 out of LV's last 6 got over the line. The Raiders are also 4-2 to the over at Allegiant Stadium. Meanwhile, Washington saw 3 out of their last 5 road games get over the number themselves. I'm going to lean toward Washington plus 3, over 49.5. Next matchup, Jags, Rams, 4:05 Eastern start time. LA's minus 13, totals 47.5. Now, the Rams are on a 3-game skid, and they've also done a really poor job covering the number lately. They're 0-5 against the spread in their last 5 straight, 30% against the number in their last 10. This is a mighty big number for a team who does not cover the number well. The Rams have really become one-dimensional offensively. They're in the bottom 5 in the NFL in home rushing. Meanwhile, defensively, they're in the bottom 3 in second quarter points allowed at home. They're taking on a Jacksonville team who, I gotta admit, they've done a fairly nice job covering the number here recently. They're 4-3 against the spread in their last 7, throwing out the Atlanta game. They're also in the top 5 in fewest fourth quarter points allowed. Myles Jack has 75 tackles on the year along with 3 TFLs. Meanwhile, Damian Wilson has 74 tackles and 3 TFLs himself. The Jags are currently in the top 10 in fewest second quarter points allowed on the road. And injury-wise, Griffin, Arnold, and Allen, they're listed as questionable for Jacksonville. Meanwhile, for the Rams, Koski, Harris, and Skronek are questionable for them. Now, total-wise, 5 out of LA's last 7 fell under the total. Meanwhile, the Jags are 3-1 to the under on the road, 82% to the under for the whole year. I'm going to lean toward Jacksonville, plus 13, under 47.5. Next ball game, Niners, Seahawks, 4:25 Eastern start time. San Francisco's minus 3, totals 45. The Niners have won 4 out of their last 5 ball games, 4-1 against the spread during that span. San Francisco also plays their best football on the road. They're 4-1 straight up when traveling. The Niners are currently in the top 3 in the NFL in fewest points allowed per contest away from home. Nick Bosa has 11 sacks on the season, 16 tackles for loss, and a couple of forced fumbles for Bosa. Meanwhile, Fred Warner leads the club in tackles with 92. Warner also has 4 tackles for loss and a couple of fumble recoveries. They're taking on a Seahawks team who lost their last 3 straight, 2-8 straight up in their last 10. Seattle's gotten the W just 1 time at home this year, and their defense is in the bottom 3 in stopping the pass at home. Now, offensively, they've had problems there as well. They've done very little to establish the run. They're in the bottom 10 in home rushing. And when it comes to the injury report, Penny and Homer are questionable for the Seahawks. Meanwhile, for the Niners, Hurst, Hasty, and Sermon are questionable for them. When it comes to the total on this one, 2 out of San Francisco's last 3 fell under the number. They also saw 3 out of their last 5 road games fall under the total as well. Meanwhile, the Seahawks are 4-1 to the under at home, 10-1 to the under for the entire season. I'm going to lean toward San Francisco -3, under 45. Next ball game, Ravens-Steelers, 4:25 Eastern start time. Baltimore's -4.5, totals 44. The Ravens are on a 2-game winning streak, 8-2 straight up in their last 10. The Ravens are in the top 5 in offensive yards per game. They're also rushing for over 150 yards per contest as well. And speaking of rushing yards, this Baltimore defense has the number 2 rush defense in the league. Patrick Queen has 62 tackles, 9 TFLs for the linebacker. Meanwhile, Marlon Humphrey has 55 tackles along with 13 PBUs. The Ravens have a winning record on the road, and they're in the top 10 in fewest road points allowed. They're taking on a Pittsburgh club who hasn't won a ball game in their last 3 straight. The Steelers have also been pretty bad against the point spread. They're just 1-5 ATS at Heinz Field this season, 36% against the spread for the entire year. This Pittsburgh defense ranks 28th in the NFL in stopping the run. They're giving up over 133 yards a game on the ground. Meanwhile, offensively, the Steeler team has done very little. They've done very little to establish the run. Pittsburgh's rushing for just 87 yards a game. Injury-wise, Hayden, Hassenauer, Spillane, and Freiermuth are questionable. Meanwhile, for Baltimore, Campbell, Smith, Boykin, and Westry are questionable for them. When it comes to the number in this one, Baltimore's 4-1 to the under on the road. Pittsburgh 64% to the under for the entire season. I'm going to lean toward Baltimore -4.5, under 44. Next contest, Broncos Chiefs, 8:20 Eastern kickoff. Kansas City's -10, totals 47. The Chiefs failed to cover the point spread in 3 out of their last 5 ball games. They're also just 1-5 against the spread at Arrowhead Stadium this season. This Kansas City defense is in the bottom 3 in the league in yards allowed per play. They're also in the bottom 10 in yards allowed per game. And as good as their offense has been, they do a really poor job of protecting the football. They're in the bottom 3 in offensive turnovers. They're taking on a Denver defense who allows just 17 points a game. And they rank in the top 10 in yards allowed per contest. Justin Simmons has 4 interceptions on the season, 56 tackles for the safety. Meanwhile, Kareem Jackson has 66 tackles along with a pick. The Broncos are in the top 5 in fewest points allowed per contest on the road. Now, injury-wise, Harris, Massey, Saubert, Rissner, Anderson, and Cleveland, they're all questionable for Denver. Meanwhile, for Kansas City, Fenton and Niang are questionable for them. When it comes to the number in this one, Kansas City's 4-2 to the under at home. Denver's 4-1 to the under when traveling. As a matter of fact, the Broncos are officially 9-2 to the under for the entire season. I'm going to lean toward Denver +10, under 47.